Okay, so I'm going to kick it off. So we have Theo Yameogo from EY here and David Pugh from Paebbl with us today on our kickoff episode of Tech or Tradition, where we look at, are we moving towards a technology advanced pathway, or are we going back to a traditional approach? So we'll get into that a little bit today when it comes to AI in mining, AI outside of mining, and then having a bit of a broader discussion when it comes to futurist application. So maybe, Theo, if you'd like to introduce yourself first, and then we will go to David.
Yeah, so I'm Theo, or Theo, depends on whether you have an Anglo or Franco background. And I lead EY America's metals and mining practice. I'm a mining engineer by background, but I also have a degree in geophysics from Morocco. And that's me, nutshell.
All right, and David, over to you.
Awesome. So I'm David Pugh, and I live in the UK, and I am the VP of Systems and Architecture at Paebbl, which is a decarbonisation company focusing on decarbonising concrete with future-proof materials. My background's in, physics and seismology, and then from there working at McLaren Biotechnologies for a while, looking at how to bring data and data-driven work into different things, and then several years working at Anglo American across the value chain, ultimately finishing in the technology development space.
Okay, amazing. And so it's interesting because I think, so Theo, you've always been in mining, typically, right? And then David, you've come in almost a technology first industry, and then mining is very different, right? Because of just how much of an ecosystem it is with sub-ecosystems. Mm-hmm. But I think I want to start the conversation today kind of comparing where AI was when you were both in university and even your early career and where it is now. And I think you've mentioned, Theo, before, even when it comes to computers, right? So yes. AI, you said, is just the continuation of what we've started with computers. Mm-hmm. And there was even a time in university where you were building a computer because it wasn't available. So maybe if there's some contrasting moments from where you were then, where we are now, and then where we're also maybe still lagging behind with certain technologies.
Yeah, so I view technology as just a fast-moving machine. I don't see technology different from techniques. To me, it's like it just became technology now. But when we figure out bicycle, it was a technology in a way. It just depends on how far it goes. And I remember doing my PhD, I was doing numerical modeling, and I needed a computer that can actually crunch data faster. And at the time, there was no 8 gig RAM. I think at the time it was 2. So that we're talking like 2003, 2004. So nothing on the market existed. And I actually went to a government supplier of computers to ask them to build an 8 gigabyte RAM computer so I can actually do dual processing. And at the time, it didn't exist. So they're like, "Wow, we can try to do one, and if you want to use it," I said, "Yeah." And that's about 20 years ago. And today, when we're talking NVIDIA, the amount of computing we're talking about is just insane. And most people probably has that high capacity of computing on their phones. So to me, the speed. I know what Elon Musk said about the fear and the concerns. I'm never concerned about these things. I feel like the planet will figure out a way to solve itself.
Yeah, very interesting. And so, David, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I love it. Thinking about it as tools or techniques, that's very much how I think about it. I actually came into data science originally because I was using the techniques that got labeled as data science, but I didn't know it. I was just using them to solve problems. And I think that's really a key way of thinking about this, is how can these tools, how can these techniques, as they evolve, and as we often now, one of the big drivers is bringing more computational power, being able to do more. The maths has existed for quite a while. There's people who are working on some of these AI models back in the 60s, the mathematics of it, but now the computation is there, we can do so much more, and it really does help us move faster and move further.
Yeah, and I think looking at AI as tools outside of mining is where there's more of an adoption and uptake when it comes to empowering the workforce. So maybe with that lens, looking at leadership in a mining organization, and what are the cultural challenges, maybe the IT challenges when it comes to bringing AI in, and then versus how it's being deployed at a faster rate in other industries.
Dave, you want to go first?
Sure, absolutely. I think there's a lot of really good use cases of AI in other industries. I've been working with AI and machine learning my whole career, basically, and there are problems that are very natural for it. And often the industries that have been really successful, and thinking of things like healthcare, finance, risk and fraud, as well as obviously robotics, are the ones where those problems, they've seen the problem and they've brought the tools in to solve it. I think with mining, one of the really big challenges that I saw from my time working there was there's a bit of a often top-down approach to trying to bring in these ways of working, and that can really make it feel like you're trying to, everything's a nail if you have a hammer. If you're trying to bring this in without really understanding how it's helping you, it can be really, really hard. But I think the industries which have been really successful have built on top of it rather than trying to push it into what they're doing.
Sectors or industries who have traditionally been borderline like a military structure, where the elders know or are supposed to know more than the youngsters, are usually in trouble in adopting new things in general. It's not even AI is one thing, but it can be diversity and inclusion. It could be going global, because there's so many different reasons. So, our sector, metals and mining, is heavily a knowledge and elder system. And it makes it difficult for leadership, because leadership by default is going to be people of a certain charisma and age. So it makes it difficult for that group to have the new age, disruptive people that actually adopt anything new. And I think it's not just mining. I think in many sectors like this, some sectors encourage innovation and encourage disruption like deeply. Take the tech sector. Most of this, there's a variety of CEOs and variety of ages and background. Whereas in our sector and in other sectors like industrial products, for example, or transportation, tend to be certain. So those ones have hard time adopting the next level. Their job is to protect this culture and civilization, and they think protecting it means that not letting new things come in and disrupt. And I remember in high school when we used to have philosophy classes. I wish they did the same here, by the way, but they don't do it here in North America. But I remember in philosophy classes, there was a question. Our question tended to take like 3-4 hours to write in French. The question around whether or not society should foster conservatism, so elders running the show, or actually let the young and disruptive take it over. And I think it was Schopenhauer that had a clear position on that, on how you balance both. And I think industries that can balance both actually are better, because industries that actually let the disruption take over, they tend to get wiped out like quickly. So to me, that's how I look at the leadership. It's how do you balance that? Our boards are what? When I see somebody on the mining board that is less than 50, I'm always shocked. That's not normal, right?
I think that the risk is a really good comment, because mining is naturally quite a risk-averse industry. There's a huge amount of capital investment. There's a huge amount of other risks that are separate from the technologies. So trying to disrupt it, trying to bring innovation in is always quite hard, whether that is AI innovation or innovation in new systems or new ways of doing mining. And I think as an industry, these high capital, high cost industries are always going to be hard to bring this innovation into. Whereas other industries, but perhaps healthcare is a good example of one where it is still quite highly regulated and has some of the same challenges, not necessarily the capital, but some of the challenges around elders being the ones viewed as having more experience and more knowledge, and bringing in, and the youngsters being more disruptive in there. But they have started to bring some of these technologies in. I think a lot because the capacity, the people they need to keep, looking after all of us is they're not there. There's not enough doctors trained. There's not enough nurses. There's not enough people. So they see the tools as a way to help them actually deliver the service they want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting when you also look at the scale of AI as well, and where it can be difficult to manage. And David, you mentioned if it becomes this transformational thing, that's where it can be successful, but also have its challenges. So maybe what are you viewing? How do we manage that there and help to manage the scale of AI?
I mean, I really think transformation programs are not always destined to fail, but they're very hard to make successful. As soon as you start to make this a big program of, hey, we're going to transform the organization with AI, you've got so many things that are always a negative. They challenge it, they slow it down, they make it hard. If you have use cases you can deliver and solve, value you can add where you can clearly show this is how this is helping this be better. All of the industries where this has been successful, that's really one of their key drivers, whether that's looking at like imaging, recycling on a conveyor belt to better split and identify where it needs to go. It's a clear problem that they can work on and solve. They haven't gone, hey, we want to bring AI to recycling, how do we do this? They've gone about it from the problems up. And I think transformation-based approaches, while valuable for big industries and big companies, are also very hard to keep the momentum and keep the scale. You have to deliver so much for it to be successful.
Yeah, and so maybe Theo, the follow-up there, you previously mentioned as well that you have to make AI so mainstream, and David as well, have such a human interface that it's easily adopted. People that don't need to have coding skills can actually do that within an organization. So maybe is that what we just need to keep pushing on when you look at this elder type of model, that you really have to make it so easily adoptable to bring to the organization?
Yeah, so I grew up in Burkina, and we were poor, and this technology was minimal. But I can tell you that if you look at today, how people have adopted cell phones and all the technologies and social media, there was never a change management program, was there? Like there was never. Companies don't even advertise half of what this technology is supposed to do, and yet everybody goes and adopts it, and everybody's happy with it. To me, that's what mainstream actually means. And if you think about AI, we talk about it today, everybody's scared about AI. I remember this I think it was NBC or ABC. They had back in the 80s, somebody said that, oh, the internet is going to just come and go, nothing will happen. Because that's the scary thing with new stuff. There's probably more than half the population say, oh, this is never going to work. And then the 15, 20% that pushes it forward, as long as they can push it in a way that it doesn't require heavy lifting, then it's easier. So the way I look at the sector is that we need to make it so simple that we don't need a change management program. Whether today nobody cares or even thinks about whether or not there's an intern underground somewhere that open an Excel file, because it's just mainstream. So once we get to that level where I can just pull in a agentic AI when I'm underground because it's something I don't understand and there's no system to block me, then we succeeded.
David, any follow-up comments there?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I think that's a really good way of framing it. We don't teach people Excel when they join a company. It's an assumed skill. A lot of these tools that people have, we don't teach people how to use a phone. We know that people know how to use phones. And I think it's one of the really big advantages of how Gen AI especially has developed, is that it's making these interfaces easier for non-developers, non-coders to work with, and making it far more accessible to actually use these tools to work with agents to get them to do things. With its caveats, if it doesn't always go as you expect, but I think it also shifts how that mindset as an organization. IT in a lot of organizations have been gatekeepers. They've stopped work happening. They've controlled information, and they've tried to harmonize technology. But I really do see more and more with Gen AI and sort of the proliferation then of Gen AI working with other AI tools, a huge amount of opportunity to make that much more everyday work rather than the IT team's work.
Yeah, last night I was on a call with some of my teams, and we were talking about some projects we did for a client. And these are like 100, 200 page documents. And I said, well, I don't think we're going to have time for all your teams to go through that and then try to get a consensus of what the hell is. Because these are people that were not involved in those projects. And I said, why don't we just ask, Copilot to give us the free bullet point summary? And these are things that should be part of the norm. It shouldn't be, it's a bit like saving a file in PDF. Like it should be just something you do as part of your daily lives.
And so I guess on the topic of Copilot, right, we're seeing that really being rolled out in organizations, and then there's a question on data strategy and privacy and making sure that there's data governance set up, and that's kind of bringing forth many challenges, which is a good thing because you can see what needs to be done to deploy that. But with mining, when it comes to regulations, and you mentioned, Theo, that at EY to access Copilot, there's training.
Yes.
And right, that's part of the hurdle,
yes.
right? And so, David, where you are, you're in a very fast-paced startup. So it's so different, the structure of companies.
Yeah.
So how does the regulation piece and training really come into play there?
Oh, for us, we regulate it. That's the first complexity of the firms. And then we're handling data from clients, and a lot of it can be confidential. And even when they're not super confidential, they still like a GDPR on data protection. So we wanted to make sure people understood that they couldn't just use AI and then dump data into the public space. So we created our own internal AI systems first, and that was actually before Copilot. And then when Copilot was released, we then decided to use Copilot because we don't audit Microsoft, so we can use Microsoft tools. But then you needed all the training around, what we call ethics and integrity before people can access it. So you didn't want to give the tools to just some random people because the tool is super powerful. We have certain, and some countries have different regulations than others. So we have countries where you can record like meetings on Teams and then get a summary, get the action items. But some other countries you can't do that yet, so we have to so that's the beauty of regulation. In the beginning, you needed a particular permission to get agents, but now the people that do the training and go through everything, they get the agents. So we have different agents we can use, and I can tell you the agents are very, very interesting. And you said data strategy. When you install some of these AI tools in systems that access all the systems. So then we had to make sure that, okay, if I'm asking Copilot to tell me something about you and you work at EY, that it wouldn't go into your personal files and pick up the information. So you need to put barricades. So this because we're doing it, I can see some of the concerns people could have if they didn't have a right framework.
Yeah.
I agree with that. The legacy information sort of access and controls in a lot of these systems for big companies like mining companies is not there. So there's a huge challenge with making sure you're searching the right information for the right person. If I ask a question, I don't want it to come back with someone else's salary details. If I don't know that, I don't want it to come back with like, oh, hey, yeah, they're off sick with something in there. And a lot of the times, I think the regulation at the sort of national levels, but also the company governance and structures are not catching up with where AI is. And I think there's a real shift in understanding the key building blocks that need to be there to make sure that you can safely and successfully deploy AI rather than trying to put all these bits of red tape around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think also you're in Europe, David, and so is Europe, do they have some of the leading regulations around AI? Just kind of looking at it from that piece, as it is challenging. So if there's any aspects you want to add there.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a huge focus around things like GDPR and data protection. A lot of what we're working with AI is more engineering data and similar, so we don't have a huge amount of challenge from that side, which is good. It's nice. But then there's also some big focus now on kind of sovereign cloud and bringing AI into Europe and not letting this information go outside of Europe and similar. There's definitely progress on regulation, and I think challenges around how you bring AI in with workforces and get them on board with it and make them feel like it's helping them rather than hindering. I talk a lot about augmentation, intelligent augmentation, rather than AI as a framing, because what we really see is that the value is not the AI, it's the human plus the AI. They can do so much more, that they can be so much more effective. And I think that's really a key thing to think about here.
Dave, do you think that because of these new realities in geopolitics, that we'll end up just building a bunch of duplicate data centers so that we don't cross it? Because remember in the early days of data center, things seems to be okay. It was okay to build them in the US. Then the Patriot Act came up, and then now the US could tap into any data. But then we went back to something now. Like, I mean, you're in Europe, so what's your view about this NVIDIA power if we can actually parcel it around the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, we do everything cloud native, so we're very much looking at our cloud providers and where they're running their data centers for, latency and cost and billing reasons. It's easy for us to work with European data centers, but often the latest and greatest is in the US. So you kind of have to have but we want to be able to try this or test this with the US one. And I think there's some challenges thinking about where data is going. It's very easy to set things up and not control it. And I do think there will be these kind of duplicate setups as we go there. But I also think, I'm not going to throw shade on the EU sovereign cloud, but the fact that they're focusing on, well, every person working in that company will be an EU citizen, so they can't be pressurized, feels like overkill, at least for our use cases in there. So I think there's a happy medium when it comes down to this, but it is really important. The homogenization of regulations, what can be done where, is going to become a bit of a minefield in the future, I think.
I'm actually surprised that countries like Malta or Switzerland didn't capitalize on that and say that, okay, we got to build data centers and it'll be like for world peace. You know what I mean? Like, why not? I would do that. Sorry, I'm just...
No, that's good. I mean, because Europe's, it's interesting, right? You look at, we're talking about the regulation piece, and then government. And if you look at government doing regulations in industry versus government regulating themselves, it's also maybe a whole other conversation piece that we really have there. But just maybe bringing up super intelligence, that I know that term has been around for a long time now, but kind of getting into that and what does it really mean at this point in time? And dovetailing kind of from the regulation piece where we have AI that is, we don't understand what it does in some cases, like where there's interpretability and explainability. And we were earlier just talking about the large discrepancy between what AI can do with Waze and how it could give you down a wrong path versus in a situation like Claude AI, where you do have to really test it in these environments and where it can either choose blackmail if it's going to be threatened to shut down or not. So we have this big chasm of advancements and challenges where it is today. And so I guess, is superintelligence here in some capacity, or what does that even really mean maybe at this point?
I think it's really interesting. There's a huge way to pretend that the interfaces that you get with ChatGPT, LLMs, and these approaches, they're very human and they're very intelligent. They convey information in a way that can feel like there's a lot of understanding and reasoning behind it. But then you can also ask it the question of how many R's are in strawberry? I know they fix those ones out, but it falls over and trips over on very basic things. And I really do think, superintelligence becomes this buzzword. You have people talking about singularity. You have all this kind of thing. I don't foresee in the near future with the current kind of AI approach that there'll be some moment when you switch to this AGI that's all-knowing and somehow turned on. No Skynet moment in there. I'm sure I'll eat my words, but I can't see that right now. But what I do see happening is just it's a different kind of intelligence. As humans, we spend a lot of time really focusing on measuring intelligence by measuring facts. We test facts at school and in exams and all these kinds of things. And where we're moving to, AI can get all the facts. It can do these searches. It can pull that information up. It has so much more information available to it to answer questions that we're almost moving to a world where actually knowing the facts is less important than being able to reason about them. And that's really a differentiator between today's models and what humans can do in there. I do think, though, we'll see this kind of intelligence where it can brute force that kind of effect by just having so much information.
I struggle with the nomenclature of superintelligence, and the reason is I just think we just happen to be a bit stupid right now. That's all it is, and it's just a supercomputing. AI doesn't really. It's looking at information and patterns we use, and then giving us a summary of it, or giving us multiple scenarios of directions. The human still has to make the decision. And I'm an early adopter of all things technology. Like people talk about superintelligence. I remember going to university when we had Casa and Torrent. That sounded intelligent to me. How you take a file and you parcel it around the world, and then somebody downloads different pieces, and then boom, you get a movie that you're too poor as a student to go pay for, right? So you know what I mean? So. And then, like, nobody ever wondered, how the hell is it doing that? Where is it sitting? But we did these things. And I think it's just supercomputing more than super intelligence. And I tried different things. You know, I have Meta, I have Copilot, and of course, there's Siri, there's Alexa, there's all these things. And I just see them as tools more than anything. I worry a lot when I hear elders thinking that it has solved things for them. And I'm always like, why do you guys believe in this AI? Like, what if it's a bias? What is like a natural bias? And David, like, Laura and I were talking earlier around cultural sensitivity of AI. Okay, so you get a person who built, and we have a lot of people who are actually that kind of replicate themselves inside the AI world. They have their own agents. And then you take that and you send it to London to a guy who doesn't know that football is not soccer and all of this stuff. And this thing is going to get lost because the LLM is so precise in an environment that you move it somewhere else doesn't work. Or you take it, like, take a Tesla on the streets of Nairobi and tell me it's going to think, like, it's going to apply the same, right? So there's some sort of a regionalization / cultural aspects that will happen to AI. The question is whether or not there's going to be a tendency to unify it globally and not worry about the subtleties in the world, which we've done a lot, Other than the cars where we actually let the British people keep driving on the other side, that we call the wrong side, which is not right. But most of the things on the planet, we try to unify it and make it a one blanket. And it's a problem because it creates radicalizations, and then we end up with wars and all kinds of stupid things on the planet.
It's a really interesting lesson. If you think about the translation effect, we've stopped learning languages because it's easier to use Google Translate or a translation app or using AI for that. Like, I've just stuck in documents in other languages into AI and gone, hey, could we translate this to me for English? I need to be able to process this. And I used to love learning languages, but I just don't do it anymore. I don't try and learn it because I know that I'm not as good at that. It kind of abstracts away a lot of these cultural shifts.
Yes.
And I think there's a really interesting question. Will it homogenize or will it enable those different cultures to talk because it can be a translation layer? And I think, on the superintelligence side of this, a lot of it is we anthropomorphize AI a lot. People make it their girlfriend, they ask you questions like a human. We trained it. There's this whole thing of like a human reinforced learning around how AI responds. Like the way the LLMs respond in ChatGPT has been trained by humans. So we've given it this human interface. And really, it's not doing that. And if we always try and anthropomorphize the intelligence to be human intelligence, it's not going to be that, but it is going to be something different in there.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Again, because I adopted technology really early, like I can tell you when Alexa actually started speaking French because it didn't speak French for like the first 5 years, and I had to buy Google because my kids were going to French school and they couldn't prompt Alexa. I'm not kidding. Like
Oh,
if you
really?
they're going to French school, they were like kindergarten and grade one, and they'll come home and I had Alexa, but it was only speaking English, and they couldn't prompt it because the logic of Alexa, they just didn't get it. So I scrapped it and I went and I bought Google because Google had a thing where you can click French and it started speaking French. Until Alexa then got French and English, for at least for Canada, and then it got better. I mean, so
Yeah.
there's things like that that you look at it, you're like, okay, how much cultural sensitivity is going to be and how much embedded cultural things is going to be. Now, what I love about Europe, Europe is really, really big on regulation. I mean, it's a place in the world where there's been more wars than anywhere else on the planet, so they know how humans can go stupid. So, so if you think about Europe, they will think about these little subtleties between the countries, making sure that one culture doesn't override another culture. So I'm hoping that will put some discipline into the
It's interesting, and we'll flip to David this in a second, but when you look at countries trying to be the best, right, there's just no stopping AI. Everyone wants to have, we're the most advanced in this area.
Yes.
So comparing it to that, it's a very interesting how that's going to move forward. And you look at some of the programmers, they don't understand what AI does. And to me, David, you're a programmer, right? I have sometimes trouble, how do I wrap my mind around that? If we program it, but it gets to such a point where it's not like it's exponentially learning, then we just maybe can't, pardon the pun, but compute. It's actually
yeah.
really getting there. And so, and people, there's extremes. It's like, this is a real risk. People are like, it's going to wipe us out. It's 100% foregone conclusion. Like Terminator came out in 1984 and, all this stuff. And you have Rossum's Universal Robots, which was the playwright in 1921. And so you just have this narrative where it's going in that direction. Going off on a bunch of different topics here, but kind of bringing it back to Europe and regulations, but then also just advancement in general and how it's happening at such a rapid pace, balancing that we're not actually understanding what we're creating is very fascinating to me.
I think it's a really interesting question because we understand it, but what we're really doing here is it's an emergent system. We understand how we programmed it, we understand how it's built. But what we find is the combination of the different parts of this system and how it's built is producing things that were not predictable. But there's a really good example of this. I remember doing this back in school. I think it was invented in the 1970s. John Conway's Game of Life. I don't know if you've ever tried it or played it. It's got a very simple algorithm, and you basically click dots, and the dots sort of will flip color depending on their neighbors. Super simple logic. But it's emergent. It can have these really complex behaviors and patterns and things that you don't program. You're just clicking these dots, and the combination of that and its rules allow these very dynamic, complex behaviors to arise. And mathematically, we can probably work backwards from what got there, but we can't predict it forwards. And I think that's one of the things with this is like I don't, but I know that some of the leaders in this field really do understand the maths behind this. But it is that emergence of how the scale and the complexity of these networks that are behaving that is what's difficult to see.
As long as you have an unplug button, you'll be fine.
Up until it gets some information on someone, it's like, if you unplug me, I might reveal this to the world. So
that is true.
All there's some great, embedded ones now, so they'll be in robots as well soon. But I really do think that with this, a lot of it is the fundamental behavior. We're seeing interesting patterns that are captured in text, and in the text it's been trained on, and in the different data it's been trained on. But I think that's almost a testament of how, fundamentally we use all these different text, images, etc., to communicate, to share ideas, and it's actually encoding those ideas at some form from it. But I don't ever expect it to be well, as I said, I'll probably leave my hat. I don't expect the Skynet moment of like, oh, we need to pull the plug super quickly.
Yeah, you and I I know we like dystopian movies, and I remember driving my kids in Namibia. That would have been maybe 3 years ago. Okay, and we are in the Damara region. The Damara region, there's no technology there. It's like people, there's like early civilization still living in the caves. They don't really interact much. They still have the clicking language and everything. And I remember telling my kids that this is the future of the planet. Because if we wipe it out, they're gonna be like, it's gonna be like a dystopian movie. Like they're gonna be the ones saying, "Oh yeah, these people came and they built these machines, and then something happened and destroyed the world." So there is still future for the human race, no matter what, because there's still people that are at different pace, and they will maintain the genetic material we had. May not be the developed world, but who cares?
That's right. It's survival.
Exactly.
That's the most important thing.
We somehow ended up in the AI is going to take over the world timeline here. I actually think, I mean, I always find those dystopian directions very fun to watch and read, but I do think that, to your comment about countries wanting to be the best at it, a lot of the politicians don't understand what AI is. They just know that, oh, hey, everyone's talking about it. And I think a lot of this is, hype cycle, however you want to think about it. There's a lot of that drive of like, hey, AI is really important, it's going to change the world. And it will, and it is changing the world in areas, but it's not this sort of... I don't see it as being the change in the world today. I see it as being one of several that we are getting to. As we build up more compute, as we build up more knowledge, we can do more with this information as we connect. We've increased, think about the internet. Back when I was a kid, you used to dial up, you had the modem going off with all its noises. It was like super rare to even have the internet at times. Whereas now everybody's got like gigabit streaming videos, all of this kind of thing. There's so many things that are changing as well that's not AI. That I think a lot of it is just this ongoing evolution, build up of technologies and tools. And I do think, fundamentally, if we use them as tools, if we use them as ways to abstract and capture knowledge and to learn from others, we can do so much with them.
I also think that, yesterday I was talking to somebody about a concept that is from the movie Westworld. I don't know if you watch Westworld.
I haven't. I know it's on my list. I have not watched Westworld yet.
Have you heard of Westworld? There's a lot of British actors in it.
I watched it on the plane a few times.
Yeah, so I found, so after working in Saskatchewan in uranium and nuclear, I actually started thinking that fear in countries or civilization depends on what they scared themselves with over time, okay? More than anything else. So if you like me and there's drought, even when I'm driving and I hear there's drought, I panic because I'm used to drought creating more problems for farming, more problem for water. Then you get into like all sorts of diseases because that's how I grew up. So I get scared by things that I'm familiar with that have destroyed things. What I find interesting when I was in Saskatchewan is that most of the people from the northern communities who never watch none of these shows around like people going green when they touch like nuclear or kryptonite, none of this. It's like they did not have access to that technology, like that TV, those shows. They were not afraid to work in uranium mines, okay? And the way I think about AI is the way I think about these movies that we have created that makes people worry. Like Westworld, people will be like, yeah, one day these guys gonna rebel against us, they're gonna wipe us out, whatever. So there's like a psyche, but we're lucky. That psyche is regional. It's not like a global psyche, because if you go to my mom's village in Burkina and you say that, hey, we got AI and it can answer any question, can help you put the seeds in the ground, the person is like, yeah, great. They're not going to see danger. They're going to see, okay, this is all positive. So I find that also has an impact on how we view AI and how we can have politicians that basically say, oh, this is going to wipe us out and whatever. It's the same, to me, it's the same concept like aliens. I did not grow up thinking that aliens ever exist. Then I come in North America, and there's like following of aliens and how it's gonna come at some point. I'm like, well, obviously they're not landing in Africa because we don't know about them. So that's how I see the fear around AI. It's like people are exposed to other things that they think they're gonna lose control.
I think with AI that we have an opportunity to use these tools today that we wouldn't have had before. We have an opportunity to work and use these to help ourselves be more productive, to do more with our lives that we want to do. And I think if we look at it that way, people have been scared of technology over time, but really it's often been, not always, definitely not always, but it's often been positive rather than negative in what it's done. And embracing that, giving it a go, trying it is definitely a good way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and even when it comes to the workforce challenge, right? So it'll be interesting to go 10, 15 years in the future and see what the impact is there, because then one side of the coin you have where just bringing it back to mining, technology and mining can help to really attract and retain certain people at a certain level of skill. And then it's also where we're going to have AI help people to do their job better or move away from some of the mundane things. And then people who are in labor jobs can also transition to other labor jobs as well. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, how you need to, part of how it can be structured, being seen as a tool. But there is a real labor challenge. So
I actually I think it's my friend Mario from Argentina who, when they were talking about AI, and he mentioned that the people should worry about AI are the people who went to university. Okay, it's not the trades, it's not the mechanics, it's not that, because AI basically take the knowledge, like David, you were talking about in the beginning, something where you go, you learn something, you do a test, you pass, and you boom, you now an engineer or an accountant, whatever, but it makes that knowledge accessible to anyone, mm-hmm. right? So you can look up how to do things, and it makes the blue collars actually better equipped, and they don't need the supervision of the engineer or the accountant or finance person, whatever. I'll give you an example. There's a guy who's supposed to install a gate, in my neighborhood. He never done it before because, not every day do install gates. He actually went on Copilot and he found out how to drill the hole and do it by himself. He didn't need to talk to an engineer or whatever. He can see the drawing, can see everything. This is how equipping the workforce will be in the future. We, in mining, we talk a lot, and David, you've probably seen it. Every time we have retrenchment or retirement, people are, oh yeah, what's going to happen to the young people? There's going to be a knowledge gap. Well, if we build the right LMM, that's the retirement, that's the knowledge. And young people can then access it, right? So mm-hmm. I wouldn't need to tell a junior engineer how to do mine planning. They're just going to ask, okay, how do you do mine planning? And they may build an agent that just tells them about mine planning, and then they do mine planning every day. And they probably do it the best because they'll do it with less biases. Than having a guy who doesn't like building sumps, and there's don't put a sump, just keep going. But AI will say, according to regulation, need a sump every 100 meters, so then the kid will do it. So to me, that's mm-hmm. how for the sector, that's how I see it. And then it's less time, messing around, more time just getting the job done and focusing on the next big thing.
There's a great opportunity with it being able to capture knowledge and help capture it in a human way. I've seen examples. I was at an event where a lot of industrial sectors were talking about the challenge they've got of aging workforce, not enough skills coming in, and how to actually capture the learnings and the understandings that these people have of running the machinery, running the equipment, making this work. Mm-hmm. And they were saying, both the combo of using it to help train and guide and support, but also helping actually, people who might not want to sit down in front of a computer and type in all their instructions of what they're thinking, but they can talk to it, and AI can process the words they're saying and help put that into the right structure for the training materials, or they can record videos instead of having to take photos and put it into a document. Mm-hmm. It's quite a powerful opportunity in there. I think an interesting side effect though is, we think about like map reading versus GPS and Google Maps and that kind of navigation. 10 years ago, you'd have learned how to map read, you'd have understood how to navigate from maps. Whereas today, I really don't think many people do still know how to do that. But again, 10 years ago, you probably didn't learn how to navigate with a compass and the stars. Like, we've moved on as we built these technologies, but it does take away that understanding. So we have to be careful, I think, with where we are supporting, that people are still building that understanding. Otherwise, we'll never get better than today's knowledge.
So that kind of brings up something, I'm trying to phrase this properly, but when you look at kind of ingenuity and inventing and coming up with ideas, like just looking at people spelling, right? We have autocorrect, and now that's just so embedded in everything, and people's grammar skills they're not where they used to be because they don't really need to necessarily be at that level anymore.
Yes.
So I often wonder, what is the evolution of our brains when we're bringing AI and technology enabled more? Because we're going to, in some cases, use less parts of our brains. Are not going to be, as active in certain areas. And so I think where I'm going with this, when it comes to inventing, and I don't know if it's not a real risk, because you have ideas coming from AI. You can ask ChatGPT for input in other ways, but do you think to some degree they're not as like a loss of ingenuity or a creativity, or how do you think that kind of fits in when we have information kind of available to us at our fingertips, and you have convenience coming in a little bit more?
It's a really interesting question. I talk a lot about engineering serendipity, how we can use these tools to help find these ideas and support that. But there's a real risk. You ask ChatGPT, how do I do something? And it comes back and it tells you. It may not be right, but it tells you something. It's quite like, here's the answer, rather than what do you think about it. I have been setting up mine to be a bit of a rubber duck for me. So it's actually, I ask it questions and it comes back and says, have you thought about this? Or what about that? Or you might want to think about this kind of thing, instead of telling me the answer that it has. It gives me options and ideas and helps me keep iterating and moving forward. So I think if you set it up in the right way, it can help with that ingenuity. It can help you work at kind of the speed of thought, rather than the speed of, hey, I need to go and find this information. Oh, I lost track of what I was doing. But I also do think if we're not careful, if we, just keep asking it to answer. Some people have said we've already crossed this point where it's starting to train on its own output now, and it's never going to get better because it's just learning from itself in there. And I think there's this kind of risk where if you just ask it to answer you, it really helps you or stops you from thinking. It stops you from exploring that.
Yeah. I think that's well, first of all, I think sometimes we overrate the ingenuity of the human race. I don't think. I think if we have 10% of the 8 billion people inventing stuff, we'll be fine. So that's my first thought. The second one is, to Dave's point, it gives you answers, but those answers are baked in the model that he has. So it doesn't venture into new realities. And I know that people are, especially Elon, they're afraid of this new reality. I want to see AI venture into the new reality, started telling me that here's the answer today of what everybody's doing. But, according to my algorithm, there's other venues we haven't looked into, because that will drive ingenuity. That will drive, when I'm driving, whether I'm using Waze or any of them, I'm always surprised it's not asking me which lane I'm on. Because none of this stuff matters. I need to tell you if I'm on the middle lane or whatever, and then you can say, okay, yeah, this lane's going to get stuck. It just gives me, okay, this is what you should do. I'm like, well, why?
Yeah, and I think, David, and this is to both your previous comments, where there is a perception where it's super intelligent, but where it's, when you break it down in that way, that it's not. And anytime, so new information, new knowledge means you're going to have new ideas. And that's where we need to kind of keep getting to. We haven't even gotten to kind of like the quantum aspect of this discussion. I know you both have physics backgrounds, so that's a whole other discussion. And when we were earlier talking about programming, it's very interesting how AI mirrors us so much in a way that we probably subconsciously might not realize, like the masses. So it's very fascinating. But yeah, definitely, I haven't thought about AI that way, when it's not actually looking at those new realities. It's right somewhat omnipresent in some cases the information it can access. So that's that's interesting. What would that look like? What would that look like if AI could go into those new realities?
I think it'll be better. It'll be, as long as AI is an advisor, I think we're fine. I think the difficulties is when AI start making decisions. And now we got codes to prevent that, but if AI gets smarter, he can get codes to prevent you from preventing it.
Yeah.
And it can be very interesting. When we talk about, because it's all technology, it's all whether or not the human is in charge or something else is in charge. We saw with the Boeings how the system wasn't ready yet, and then the pilot will try to get the plane out, and then it's going to push the plane down. Yeah, these are real things that even with AI we need to be careful. I remember the Air France crash from Rio. I don't know why this thing just disturbed me. But basically they took off, and then the plane thought they were in a certain altitude, but then dived down and then crushed everybody. So to me, AI making decisions, I don't mind AI giving people the options, and then the human didn't have to press a button. And to your point, does it mean our brain then doesn't get used? Well, I was told our brain doesn't get used at all right now, but but we may be able to be more creative. Oh, most of us will just become, simple life. What's the show where the something guide to the galaxy? What's that show?
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, see? So people were happy just having, sipping their drinks and sitting on these little, they look like scooters, and they were happy. Is it really about happiness or no to be on the planet? I don't know. Maybe it's not about productivity.
I think there's a really interesting aspect there of like, a lot of this is about the systems that AI works in. It's like, it doesn't actually matter if it's AI making a decision or just the system making a decision. As a person having a decision made about them, or when that decision is made in there, if I can't understand why that decision is made, it can seem arbitrary, capricious, and difficult.
Yeah.
So actually thinking not just about the AI piece, but the whole system, what does this look like? Going back to your question about what if it could think about new things and explore new parts? I think AI as a whole can. It's just the Gen AI tools are not connected into that, but it's not far to be able to say, well, we've got some Gen AI model, LLM or something like that, and then we've got some AI physics model that can predict, turbulence around a car, and now your car design is both being prompted and cycled through by those two models on its own. And I think there's some really interesting opportunities, but to Theo's point, if we don't set up the systems, the guardrails, and understand what might happen, it can still be very, very stupid if it doesn't have all the context.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And so when you look at AI in trading, right, how in seconds there's multiple trades kind of happening, which is interesting. And I think, well, what if, and this is just kind of playing the scenario that if that were to go rogue, you could have a very greedy AI kind of rogue situation happen. But I haven't delved into that deep enough on what have been the challenges or barriers in actually getting that to function, and that there is a trust that AI is in the stock markets.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly, without me going super deep into that, but that is working today, that's being managed well enough. So there are guardrails in that.
Yeah.
In that situation.
I have a friend who's a big shot at a high frequency trading unit at one of the large banks here, and there was we had a barbecue a couple of weeks ago, and there was a debate between him and another guy who comes from Quants, from a different bank, and there was debate on whether or not AI will take it over, and one of them said, well, it's not possible that AI can go and make a mistake. We've done that before. What is AI was a code, but it's not possible to take it over because of human behaviors. Mm. If it was just AI playing with AI, maybe it'll work. But if you add humans to the equations, humans are not super logical, and AI will get lost. So that was his position. But the other guy, the quants guy, was like, no, AI is gonna do it quickly. But then there was an assumption it's gonna do it across the world, and it's gonna just be AI doing it.
Yeah. I mean, there's the great example of the flash crash where the high frequency trading at least exacerbated, if not caused, a very sudden rapid crash in the stock market because the algorithms are set up in a way that they just responded and they did what they've been trained to do, but they hadn't ever seen that specific position that it had reached. And I think, with a lot of these, that was just algorithmic rather than necessarily more complex AI. With all of these, I think it's the way I think about AI fundamentally, and the way we train and build AI today is it's an interpolation. We give it lots of dots. It could be very large dimensions and lots of different sets of things it's training on, but it's just joining the dots in a very clever way. If it's never seen a dot, it doesn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
It has no understanding of where that dot comes from or what's happening there. So humans are very irrational. We're not always logical. We're not always straightforward. We often like to create these new dots and give it things that it's not seen before. So for sure, it's definitely a challenge with how it will go. But I think it's also that approach for training. This is why I don't think superintelligence in this way will ever really exist as a sort of human replacement, because there's so many dots in the world. It's why AI cars can struggle a lot. They have to have so much training data. You think about pick a Tesla. Its autopilot's been trained on probably at this point centuries to millennia of driving, and we teach someone to drive in maybe 3 months, maybe 3 weeks. Very different way of training.
Yeah, I like to see a future. So I remember doing an interview years ago around just analytics, and I was saying that the future may be biomedical. Because at the end of the day, we're on this planet. Well, there's other people on this planet for their own sake, but we're on this planet just have a good life. And I think AI can help if we actually can marry the bio with the environment. But I know it's going to be hard to get it approved. But think about it this way: when you have moments in your life where you at your happiest, let's say AI can figure it out, that this is your happy moments, and try to optimize that every day. So you'll wake up and then it will know which music to play, but it needs to have options, though, even though it's going to be boring. Know which music to play. It will know what, based on your biological reading, if you didn't sleep well, how strong should the coffee be or the tea, and then it'll be basically telling you, I think today you should skip muffins because your blood level is a bit too high. Like, that is very useful for humans to be happy.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if somebody's working on that.
No, and so this is interesting because no one has accomplished anything great without a teacher or other people helping them.
Yes.
And I think in some cases that when it comes to mentorship, training, right, there's the physical training aspects you're talking about, there's lifestyle and prompting them. Is that going to really help make kind of having a mentor or a trainer available to people? And when you look at what change, you must overcome or be greater than your environment, your body, and time.
Yes.
So you have to make those new decisions and those new choices, which then lead to new behaviors. So the more, if we can bring AI in from that perspective, where it is helping to change behaviors, and it can also track behaviors, because in a lot of cases, if we don't, right, you can't, you have to be able to measure change. And if it can plot that over time and say, well, look, when you made this decision not to eat muffins every day for 2 weeks, this is actually what happened, and I can accurately read that. So I think that's something really helpful. And I think that feeds back into our own evolution, because it's new information, and that makes us happy when we can actually see change and measure that and build those new behaviors.
Yeah.
David, what are you thinking?
I think that I'm a very data-driven person. I love to measure things. I love to see what's happening. I love that. But I also think there's a big challenge where if you take away decision making, if it's just telling you what to do, it's optimizing for something, but is it optimizing for your something? Is it actually helping you be better at it? We've got, I'm not going to say that this is a trial run of what AI could do to us as a civilization, but we've sort of seen like the shocks that changing how people interact and what they do happen with COVID and lockdowns, and people very much changing how they work, how they interact with people, what they do. And I think in the UK, this is the first year now of kids who've not been through their kind of exam periods during COVID. And there's a marked difference in how grades were done, what grades were achieved, learning, and all of those outcomes because of those differences in culture and environment. I think it's very important to the complex systems thing. Humans are very complex systems as well. Complex AI plus complex humans can be a very complex system to work with. So we have to be very careful about what the outcome actually is, what emerges from that.
Yeah, I like to see if there's any studies around how much we've been actually listening to the early days AI, like the Alexas, the Google Minis, the Waze, because I don't listen. So to me, it's natural. Like if it gives me a problem or something that I don't want to do, I just don't do it. But I do that. It's like some days I drive and I think that maybe it will actually start telling me that, oh, we noticed you're not listening to the instructions. What's wrong with you? So, and I think it's important to understand that, and maybe even teach that to people. Like start teaching kids that, hey, just because I heard there's a kid that killed himself, right? Like last year, because of AI. There's something. Oh no, this year. Like he made an AI girlfriend and then wanted to kill himself to rejoin the virtual world, or whatever. So I think at the kids level, we just need to start telling them just because Alexa said to do X, doesn't mean you have to do it.
Yeah, critical thinking is needed when working with AI outputs. You need to ask the question of what it's telling you and why, and it's unhelpful. And I think this comes back to the reasoning. You need to not just take as trust what it says. You need to look at how you reason with it.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to mining a little bit. And so it's varied. We do have certain groups going in the traditional way because that's trusted, you can manage it, you can in some cases better protect that right. And then we do have AI advancements where they are seeing this implemented, and AI that can be used for restructuring and at those other levels. So I guess maybe what are some of the kind of closing thoughts that you would like to leave when it comes to where AI is today and how we can best move forward with it?
Well, I'll go first so Dave can close, because he has the external view on the sector, so he probably knows more. I think AI will just be part of the norm. I think AI will be just like computers in the workplace. I think because we have it on our phones and because we use it at home, the sector can try whatever they want to do, but there's a new generation of people that'll come in and start using it no matter what. So it's better to embrace it and figure out the mechanism of governance than to think you can shut it out. And it's also better to start thinking about where we can use it. The agents should be deployed. Well, first of all, you should make sure you have data governance so that nobody's private data goes anywhere, and also so that some of the proprietary data like reserves, resources, health and safety, accessibility reports. So make sure these are not just accessible, but to stop AI in massive mining is a waste of time. I know many companies are trying different AI stuff that I find complicated, like exploration. I'm always skeptical around AI in exploration, but I'm very bullish on AI in like commercial environment because this is like business. AI in like optimizing productivity, AI in like optimizing how you plan and things like that. Things where human is just too limited to think through bunch of different equations. But to say that AI is not going to get into mass mining is wrong. I think it's probably already mass mining. People just don't realize how much.
Yeah, and just a super quick comment there, but so you mentioned exploration. I know we didn't get into Cobalt and kind of that piece and even the workflow aspect, but you know, a lot of folks are kind of looking at how this is going in exploration. So does that align with what you mentioned when you AI in exploration, or do you think that it is one of the fastest growing areas in mining when it comes to AI?
It's where people think they can go find deposits quickly. But I'm not going to name names, but there's other companies that thought they'll do analytics and find it quickly, and then it didn't work out. I think the Earth is much more complex and less rational than what most people think. So that's why I find in exploration, I mean, I'm curious to see how Cobalt will work, but I find in exploration is one of the most complicated areas of the planet. I study geophysics. There's some logic once you know, and you can do back understanding of what you're seeing, but it's hard to go blind and discover because of all the processes it takes and the amount of luck you need. This is just my business.
I very much think with this exploration, especially in discovery, there's a huge amount of data, which is why it is such a fast-growing area, because you can use AI to help process data to help infer things from that. But I very much agree with Theo. If you think it's a magic tool that you can just be like, here is Earth, go find me the next big copper deposit, I don't think it can ever do that reliably. Or if it can, it will do a lot of other stuff as well at that point. But I do think there's also a huge opportunity when you talk about the workflow side. You know, one of the things I see as a real opportunity in the exploration space, and I think this is where a lot of the value goes, is how can you take away the mundane task to gain information? How can you process information in a more consistent way? How can you take away the need to do manual core logging and make that more automated? How can you take away complex model building of the geological models? And I really do think there is opportunities all across the mining value chain to make use of AI in solutions specific to that, as well as the more general productivity side in there.
Yeah. No, it's good to look at from that perspective, and also why mining companies need to bring in AI, right? Because it'll be very, in some cases, challenging to catch up and implement it at that level. So I guess, David, over to you on kind of your thoughts closing on, you know, there's tech versus tradition, and how can really help to, you know, move AI forward, because you have that external lens now kind of coming in from the mining industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think I very much agree with Theo on AI is here to stay. People are using it today, especially the generations coming out of university and coming into the workforce. They expect it to be there. It's been really great to be able to use it without the control. Well, I put the controls in place in my current role, and being able to work with it and say, hey, can it do this? Can it help? Can we get more out of it? And I really think using it as a rubber duck, using it to help you do better, augmenting yourself, is the way to go with this. And then I think the other really key thing here is, for people who want to use it, is just start using things, give it a go. And I think for the companies out there who are trying to control how it's used and make sure it's used safely and securely, they need to think about how they can empower people to start using that, to start trying and start experimenting, rather than trying to come up with a perfect blueprint to get going on it, because that will take too long and they'll lose control of what's there.
Yeah, well, this is an amazing conversation when it comes to AI mining and everything in between that we discussed. Didn't even kind of, again, get into quantum computing or even that realm, so maybe it'll be a secondary conversation, because I'm very fascinated by both of your physics backgrounds. So thank you both for partaking in this and for just having a very, very open conversation on where AI is today.
Thank you.